I saw her on a TV show, and I had never seen her before, so I said that was it. For decades, Robert Redford represented serenity in the midst of upheaval, the gentleman of New Hollywood. While others erupted, faded, or burned out, Redford remained steady, brilliant, and above the fray. He did not seek out headlines, he did not engage in gossip, and he'd never aired filthy clothes until tonight. At 88, the Oscar-winning star finally revealed what those closest to him had known for years. There were actors who made his job intolerable, men he disagreed with behind closed doors, and legends he couldn't tolerate. And while the performances were memorable, the experiences were anything but. These are not rumors. These are names. Some will leave you heartbroken, because by the time you get to the last name on Redford's list, you may never watch one of Hollywood's most revered classics the same way again. John Hackman. Redford and Hackman appeared together in Downhill Racer and worked on various projects throughout the years, but they were never friends and never wanted to be. Hackman's raw energy often clashed with Redford's polished, controlled style. On set, Hackman was known to burst during rehearsals, question direction, and reject subtlety in favor of brutal power. Redford found it exhausting. "He's one of the greats," Redford once told a coworker, but he didn't care who he had to steamroll to get there. What started as mutual respect in the 1970s quickly devolved into guarded distancing. Redford praised Hackman's hard ethic. Nobody could accuse him of being lazy, but he found the techniques intolerable. Hackman treated each role like a battleground. He did not only act, he dominated. Directors were frequently caught in the crossfire, and co-stars became collateral damage. Redford, who favored collaboration and quiet discipline, found Hackman's unpredictability unsettling. Downhill Racer, according to one assistant director, was unpredictable in terms of Hackman. Brilliant or belligerent? There were minor scuffles during the session, but one incident solidified their breakup. During a critical scene that required nuanced emotion, Hackman was allegedly enraged by an unfavorable lighting setup. He refused to leave his trailer, delaying production by nearly an hour. The director sought to interfere, but to no avail. Redford eventually walked to Hackman's trailer, opened the door, and informed him, in front of the crew, "This isn't your movie, Gene. It's a team effort. Show up or move aside." Hackman showed up. However, the two never spoke off camera again. In private, Redford referred to Hackman as a sledgehammer in a violin shop. It was not a question of talent. Redford has never denied Hackman's greatness. It was all about controlled demeanor and basic respect. Redford, who had began discreetly producing and directing in the late 1970s, reportedly rejected Hackman's name on multiple casting lists. It wasn't worth it. He'd write in the margins, "Great actor, impossible to be human." Their careers continued to parallel each other over the decades. They were both Oscar winners and fresh Hollywood icons, but they never appeared together again. When asked years later if he regretted not having worked with Hackman more, Redford hesitated and smiled diplomatically. "Some pairings," he explained, "just need to occur once." He left it at that. "He's one of the greats," Redford once told a coworker. He didn't care who he had to steamroll to get there. James Woods, their political and personal beliefs could not have been more dissimilar. And while they never worked together on a whole picture, she auditioned for minor roles in Redford-directed films several times and was repeatedly turned down. Redford later admitted that he found Woods profoundly disturbing and impossible to even be in a room with. Redford reportedly walked out of a casting session after Woods challenged him on Vietnam policy during a read for a courtroom drama. Redford later admitted that he brought disruption to places that needed tranquility. "I was not interested in handling that energy." It wasn't just about politics, though that certainly didn't help. Wood's combative attitude became exhausting for Redford, who is methodical, principled, and quiet. Woods took satisfaction in being the sharpest person in the room, but Redford did not enjoy intellectual competition. Redford reportedly stated that he had never sought to grasp the narrative from their first meeting. He wished to master it. The two men represented different extremities of the creative spectrum. Redford thrived on quiet intensity, character subtlety, and emotional complexity. In contrast, Woods exploded into rooms with kinetic force, sharp, wired, and unpredictable. He could offer you brilliance, according to one casting director, but you had to get through the storm first. Redford was unwilling to take that chance. The confrontation became legendary among casting directors. One especially stressful interaction occurred in the late 1980s. During the pre-production of a legal thriller that Redford was developing, Woods appeared in a supporting part and moved into the scene with razor-sharp precision, only to break character halfway through to discuss a line's political implications. What started out as an acting exercise rapidly turned into a lecture on Cold War foreign policy. Redford listened for fewer than 2 minutes before closing the script and departing the room. He later told me that if I wanted a debate, I should return to college. Even years later, Woods continued to mock Redford during interviews and private industry panels. While never addressing him directly, Woods would make infrequent references to Hollywood hypocrites who preach peace but govern studios like generals. Insiders who knew the background could see through the hidden jargon. Redford, for his part, refused to comment publicly, but the blacklisting remained silent and absolute. His casting notes reportedly contained a single frank line next to Woods' name. Never ever. Woods' tremendous talent made him a popular choice for edgy, risky roles, but Redford was not interested. He once said that tension and toxicity are not the same thing. He'd never understood that line. The opportunities disappeared. The telephone never rung again. Even as Woods' career became more about controversy than craft, Redford remained silent, with the exception of the occasional angry remark in private settings. He caused mayhem to places that required peace. Redford subsequently stated, "I was not interested in managing that energy." Dustin Hoffman. All the President's Men may have immortalized them as one of cinema's most legendary duos, but Redford was always secretly disappointed by Hoffman's attitude. Hoffman improvised regularly, questioned scripts, and had a penchant of switching blocking mid-scene. Redford, a director's actor with unwavering attention, despised the uncertainty. He believed Hoffman attempted to dominate the camera with little consideration for teamwork. They were never outwardly angry, but when asked why they never worked together again, Redford simply replied that once was enough. From the outside, it appeared magical. Two of the biggest actors of the 1970s play real-life journalists investigating the largest political scandal in American history. But behind the scenes, there was a gradual, grinding conflict between two very different artistic ideas. Redford arrived on stage prepared, meticulous, and dialed in. Hoffman favored spontaneity, occasionally changing his delivery on the fly, disrupting the rhythm and intensity that Redford had spent hours developing. Crew members characterized the atmosphere as quietly uncomfortable, not explosive or spectacular, but anxious. Hoffman would practice a scenario one way and shoot it in another. He would quietly adjust himself during shots to change the visual focus, frequently moving into Redford's light. At first, Redford attempted to dismiss it as part of the creative process. However, as production progressed, the interruptions wore him down. In one scene, a phone call sequence in the newsroom, Hoffman reportedly shot 7 takes, each with a different tone, tempo, and set of unscripted words. Redford, who had to deal with the unanticipated developments, was reputed to be enraged by the end. Director Alan J. Pakula walked the line precisely, never allowing the tension to build, yet everyone on set sensed it. Bob was clearly biting his tongue, according to one lighting technician. Every day, behind closed doors, Redford expressed concern about losing narrative cohesion. "We are trying to tell a story," he was overheard stating to Pakula during a break. "Don't chase 1,000 little moments." Nonetheless, the director managed to keep both stars in orbit, knowing that the end outcome would be unforgettable despite the fragility of the process. Redford, who went on to direct his own critically acclaimed films, emphasized precision, efficiency, and discipline. To him, acting was a team sport, and Hoffman frequently felt like a player attempting to win on his own. Redford never spoke out publicly against Hoffman, but when retrospectives and reunion panels were proposed years later, he denied them all. There was no feud, no controversy, simply a mutual unspoken agreement. Never again. Some folks just don't get it. Even if the film is a masterpiece, they were never outwardly angry, but when asked why they never worked together again, Redford simply replied that once was enough. Tom Cruise's only collaboration, Lions for Lambs, was a catastrophe behind the scenes. Redford, who directed the film, battled to overcome Cruise's corporate attitude. According to Redford, every note was about optics, not emotion or honesty, but rather brand. Cruise reportedly requested scene changes, shooting angles, and even last-minute rewrites. The film underperformed, and Redford described it as one of the most difficult ventures of his career. He never spoke with Cruise again. When the project was originally pitched, it seemed like a perfect match. Redford, the senior statesman of intellectual American cinema, and Cruise, the blockbuster juggernaut attempting to shift into serious territory. However, from the start, the chemistry was awry. Redford imagined a stripped-down political drama, understated, intelligent, and timely. Cruise came in to discuss lighting, camera angles, wardrobe, and global branding. It wasn't partnership, it was a crash. Insiders claim the tension was immediate. Cruise, who also produced the film, wanted final input on almost everything from poster design to edit timing. He reportedly appeared at production meetings accompanied by a staff of publicists and image consultants and frequently utilized terms such as market positioning and audience perception in favor of the more common actor-director language. Redford, who had previously spent 3 days practicing a silent scene for ordinary people, was shocked. Even the rehearsal procedure revealed the rift. Cruise reportedly demanded that stylists be on standby during blocking sessions in order for his physical appearance to reflect discipline. Redford subsequently stated, "I wanted the scene to show vulnerability. He wanted it to have symmetry. They couldn't agree on what the film was about." Redford interpreted it as a cautionary tale of institutional failure. "I saw it as a redemption arc for a charismatic leader." On set, the tension only increased. Cruise would frequently interrupt a scene to seek a lighting tweak or to suggest a punchier phrase that was not in the script. Redford, who is quite patient, tried to adapt it initially, but by week 3, he was clearly frustrated. One of the film's assistants remembered a moment during a shoot when Redford leaned in and softly questioned, "Are we acting or selling campaign ads?" Even in post-production, Cruise's fingerprints could be found everywhere. He reportedly asked for many cuts of his scenes, haggling over the exact length of a response shot. Redford gave him rope until the studio stepped in and sided with Cruise. That was the last straw. Redford delivered the film he could, washed his hands of it, and avoided almost all of the publicity. The film debuted to poor reviews and little box office, Cruise went on. Redford went silent. The incident left an impression, not only as an artistic failure but also as a philosophical collapse. One man tries to communicate something while the other tries to sell something. He never spoke with Cruise again. Faye Dunaway. 3 Days of the Condor was a critical success, yet it lacked chemistry off-screen. Redford and Dunaway apparently had little chemistry while filming, and sources claim the tension was visible between takes. Dunaway, known for her demanding temperament and perfectionism, regularly clashed with the director, leaving Redford in the crossfire. She wasn't difficult because she cared. One crew member stated she was challenging because she didn't trust anyone, including him. Redford referred to her as a storm in heels. From the start, the partnership appeared promising. Redford was at the pinnacle of his career, a box office sensation with a reputation for cool professionalism. Dunaway had recently returned from Chinatown and was universally considered as one of the most riveting performers of her day. However, their working approaches could not have been more different. Redford emphasized subtlety, economy, and restraint. Dunaway appeared on set every day as if she were prepared for war, fiercely protective of her craft and unafraid to challenge anyone, including the director or her co-star. She would routinely request to see dailies, rewrite lines the night before production, and change previously approved lighting setups. Redford, who believed in trusting his team and maintaining momentum, began to see the production as a daily negotiation rather than a creative zone. According to one script supervisor, during a break, Redford stated, "We're here to find truth, not micromanage every syllable into submission." Their scenes together were tight, gloomy, and tense, yet the tension wasn't staged. It was a barely restrained frustration. Dunaway would request many takes on a single sentence, changing the inflection down to the syllable. Redford, who tended to follow instinct and move forward, became increasingly annoyed. He reportedly growled, "We're not building a watch here," after she asked for a fourth reset during a minor scene. One day, at a closed-door meeting with director Sidney Pollack, the tension boiled over. Dunaway questioned her character's emotional reasoning at a pivotal passage. Redford finally snapped after initially sitting silently. It's espionage, fray, not Chekhov. The room went quiet. She walked out. The next day, she returned as if nothing had happened, but the mood never recovered. Despite the on-screen intimacy required by the script, there was nothing warm about their dynamic. Redford reportedly requested a body double B used for insert shots after Dunaway rapped. When asked about her in a press interview years later, he paused, smiled thinly, and said, "She's unforgettable." No collaborations followed, no reunion panels, no nostalgic interviews about the making of the film. She wasn't difficult because she cared, one crew member said. She was difficult because she didn't trust anyone, not even him. Redford called her a storm in heels. Robert Duvall. Though they both starred in the natural, Redford and Duvall were like oil and water. Duvall's improvisational, instinct-first approach clashed with Redford's structured precision. Redford reportedly asked Duvall to stick to the script during a pivotal scene, and Duvall flatly refused. What followed was a behind-the-scenes shouting match that crew members still talk about. Duvall wanted to play jazz, Redford said later. I wanted to play composition. It wasn't music. It was noise. From day one on set, their differences were obvious. Redford approached the film like a symphony. Rehearsed, timed, emotionally calibrated. He had spent weeks preparing for the role of Roy Hobbs, fine-tuning every detail down to body language and breath. Duvall, meanwhile, showed up with no notes, no rehearsal plans, and a firm belief that real acting came from the gut, not the page. At first, Redford admired the rawness. Duvall's portrayal of cynical sports writer Max Mercy was electric, unpredictable, and deeply lived in. But as the shoot wore on, that same unpredictability became a liability. Duvall would rewrite lines in the makeup chair, shift the rhythm of a scene without warning, or deliver a completely different emotional tone from take to take. Redford, known for his patience, began to lose it. Their differences weren't just stylistic, they were personal. Redford was quiet, measured, deliberate. Duvall was explosive, volatile, almost gleefully chaotic. On the set of The Natural, that contrast created an undercurrent of friction that never quite boiled over, but never cooled either. They were both brilliant, said one crew member, but they weren't making the same movie. The breaking point came during a crucial confrontation scene. Redford wanted to hit a specific emotional beat, one that tied directly into a larger arc he and director Barry Levinson had carefully constructed. Duvall, uninterested in any arc that wasn't his own, kept undercutting the tension with sarcastic ad-libs. Redford stopped the take, turned to Duvall, and said, "It's not your movie." Duvall fired back, "It's not anyone's until it's real." They argued for 15 minutes while the cameras rolled in silence. Crew members backed away. One sound technician later said, "Was like watching a campfire turn into a forest fire." Levinson eventually stepped in to mediate, and the scene was completed barely. After the shoot, Redford was asked about working with Duvall. His response was clipped. "He's brilliant, but I don't need to go through that again." Duvall never responded publicly, but the two were never in the same room again, even during press tours. There's a reason no second collaboration ever materialized. Not because of lack of opportunity, but because neither man had forgotten the flame out. Duvall wanted to play jazz, Redford said later. I wanted to play composition. It wasn't music, it was noise. Paul Newman. It's the name no one expected. The man most associated with Redford, the partner in Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid and the Sting, the other half of the myth. But according to Redford, the relationship wasn't what it seemed. He was charming, Redford said, but he always kept a distance. And sometimes he played dumb to get away with more than he should have. There was no dramatic feud, just the slow erosion of trust. When Newman began taking more producer control on The Sting, Redford felt the shift. He stopped being my co-star and started being my competition, he once confided. The friendship never fully broke, but it faded into polite distance. From the outside, they were lightning in a bottle, the perfect contrast. Newman was all cool blue charisma and effortless magnetism. Redford, the quiet storm, thoughtful and composed. Together, they changed what a movie star could be. Funny, self-aware, dangerously charming. But beneath the surface, Redford always sensed something guarded in Newman, a wall he could never quite scale. Their dynamic on Butch Cassidy was warm, easy, built on laughs and long days in the desert. But by the time they reunited for the Sting, something had shifted. Newman had more clout. He arrived to meetings flanked by studio execs, often with notes on scripts, casting, even camera placement. Redford, still more interested in the art than the politics, felt himself pushed to the sidelines. It stopped being two guys making a movie, one crew member later said. It became a chess match between stars. Redford kept his frustration mostly private, but those close to him saw the toll. He admired Newman deeply, but he also resented the way the public treated Newman as the soul of their partnership. In interviews, journalists would direct questions to Newman first. Headlines would lean on Newman's name. Paul was the face, Redford once said, and I was the footnote. The years that followed brought cordial interactions, tributes, the occasional shared appearance, but they never made another film together. Offers came, scripts were floated, but nothing ever landed. When asked why, Redford would always say timing wasn't right, but those who knew the truth understood. Timing wasn't the problem. Trust was. There was no rift, no betrayal, just two icons quietly drifting apart, one silent mile at a time. He was charming, Redford said, but he always kept a distance. And sometimes he played dumb to get away with more than he should have. There was no dramatic feud, just the slow erosion of trust. When Newman began taking more producer control on the Sting, Redford felt the shift. He stopped being my co-star and started being my competition. He once confided. The friendship never fully broke, but it faded into polite distance. Some of these names will hurt, others will feel inevitable, but together they paint a picture few have seen before. Of a man who, for all his poise and restraint, carried the scars of collaboration just like anyone else. Because for all the sunshine on screen, Redford's Hollywood had shadows too.